Stumps and Stories podcast with Nishad Pai Vaidya.
Imagine you've been called up to the World Cup, but you haven't played a game in 4 years, and suddenly you're just required to play a game for your country. You pick up the ball, you play a few games, and then you sit out. And ultimately, you're up against one of the best teams the world has seen in one-day cricket. No one would have given you a chance. But instead, what you do is take 3 wickets for only 7 runs and just dazzle the stage called the World Cup, picking wickets of Ricky Ponting, Darren Lehman, and of course, Brad Hogg, and making a huge impression. But through that journey, this is just a part of it, because the man I'm going to talk to, of course, made a mark on the world stage on that one day. But if you look at his journey, and not just his journey alone, but also that of his family, it is a legacy. It is a legacy in Kenyan sport that has lived the test of time. And joining me today is Aasif Karim from Nairobi, a former Kenyan captain in cricket. But not just that. Let me tell you, he also played tennis for his country, represented them in the Davis Cup, appeared at a Grand Slam, and yes, runs a very successful business. Other than that, he has gone through a painstaking effort to document the great journey of his family, a sporting dynasty called the Karims. And we've got Aasif joining us. Thank you so much. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation because, going back to the 2003 World Cup, I vividly remember watching that match live. And what struck me as a young boy at the time was how you just knew what you were doing that day and everything that you did came off. But little did I know, it was just that one day in a long journey.
Thank you very much for this invitation and this interview. I also look forward to doing this interview, and having read your book on the work that you're doing in promoting sports and cricket. I wish you well on that. Yes, 2003 is something that's being talked about even to date after 20 years. And it's something that, as you rightly said, is a journey. It was that one-day event, but the process of it was a good 20 plus years playing for the country.
You were born in Kenya to Mr. Yusuf Karim, who, of course, was a sporting legend and known all over Mombasa, played tennis. What was his influence like? And tell us about the early days, picking up the tennis racket or the cricket ball. How did all that happen?
Yeah, as we said, my father comes from a huge sporting background. That credit goes to my grandfather, Mr. Ahmed Karim, who came to Kenya in 1926 from Mumbai, of course, via Gujarat from Kera and Mundra is where he was born. And so when they came down to Kenya in 1926, stayed a few years and went back to Mumbai in 1932-33. And my father was born in 1935. When he was 2 years old, they moved permanently to Mombasa in Kenya. And remember, the Indians then were moving from one colonial continent to another colonial continent, where the scenario was very, very tough. Survival was really the key to all the families then. And so it was a matter of survival. And what baffles me to date is how my grandfather promoted his children to go into sports when people were trying to look for some food on the table. So not only did he encourage them to pursue in school whatever could be done, but sports became a huge thing in our family. And so by the time my father was, I think, was 14 when he started playing tennis, he bought a racket from an auction. I think it was worth about 5 annas in Indian currency, or 5 shillings in Kenyan currency. And the strings were broken, so he managed to get it fixed. And within 2 years, at the age of 16, he became a Mombasa champion. And went on to win for 25 consecutive years. He was unbeaten. It may even be a world record, to win a championship for 25 consecutive years, from the age of 16 up to the age of 42. And of course, that became a talk of the town. It became the talk of the country. It became the talk of East Africa, because that's where all the Gujaratis or the Indians dominated, in Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. So he was a household name, not only in Mombasa, he became a household name in East Africa. And surprisingly enough, as I was growing up, I only thought he played tennis. It's only as in my formative years that when I found out that he was a formidable cricketer and a formidable volleyball traditional. In those days, there used to be a traditional volleyball being played. And so he was really the center of attraction on every sport that he played. He played at the very high level in cricket, scored 18 centuries in his short career that he played. And a lot of visiting teams from India and Pakistan were coming in the 50s and 60s. And he always had a very credible performance. He also managed to play against Basil de Oliveira. There was a South African colored team that had come in 1958. And so he did play that. And then he also represented the country in tennis in Egypt in 1974. So that is his background on the sports. And so his influence to my siblings and myself was enormous. Because I remember those days, there was no television or there was no other sources. But so sports was a major outlet. And so obviously, as your father being a superstar or a hero, as what we call in these days, we emulated him. We wanted to, continue sports. And more importantly, my parents, my mom and my dad, despite having a lot of challenges economically, also supported us in going into sports. And so that's how the whole thing evolved.
And did you at any time feel the pressure? Because I think wherever your father went, he would have been recognized in East Africa. Everyone would have wanted to, get a piece of his mind, get some of his time. He'd obviously have been the center of all the focus wherever you went. So at any stage as a young man, did you feel the pressure, or it was just about, I just want to be like him?
Well, it was more of an admiration, more than pressure. It was a lot of admiration. I mean, to date, even I still admire him, even he's no longer in the world. But, my admiration, my focus, when I look at a hero, that's my hero, because he, knowing the challenges that he was going through economically, knowing the difficulties that was around there, yet he sustained to remain a champion. It's not easy when you have so many factors revolving around you and you're still going out to play and to keep on winning and to keep on performing consistently. I mean, that requires character. It's easy to do a one-off season. You can do well. But to consistently perform in every sport that he played with those challenges, I mean, it can only be a huge admiration. And he was admired very much by everybody. Even just talking to him was a novelty for many people, to go and visit him, for him to have a conversation with you, because he had a lot to offer. He was a man of character. He was a man who believed, but very humble, very simplicity, but he had a lot to offer, and he was very encouraging to all the people that he interacted with. And so for us, my brother and myself, it was an inspiration, and we carried on from there and continued the legacy to date.
And cricket and tennis, did both start at the same time for you?
Yes, incidentally, what happened is that we belonged to a community, and every community then had a sports club in Mombasa. So cricket was like a communal sport for us, and tennis then also was there were some tennis courts there, and for me it became automatically, because that club you played, there was cricket, there was tennis, there was volleyball, there was football. So cricket was something that was inborn in the community, and tennis became, because it was a legacy that my father had. Everybody was talking about him on tennis. So that is simultaneously in school and in clubs, we played both the sports at that time.
And talking about cricket, as a teenager, you went to Zimbabwe on your first tour with some big names, and of the very first ball, you took a wicket. Can you tell us about that process of getting into the Kenyan team, which had, I think at the time, just broken away from East Africa? As viewers may know, East Africa had played the 75 World Cup with Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, and I think Zambia playing together. But this was a different Kenya that was actually willing to step on the world stage.
Yeah, Kenya got there. Before I answer on the Zimbabwe trip, let me give you a brief on how Kenya got the membership at ICC.
Oh, yes, please.
Yeah, until 1980-81, Kenya was part of East Africa. And of course, in those days, there was a quota system, even when you selected. I mean, that's how it was also in India, the West Zone and the East Zone, and everybody had to be accommodated in that era. And that was how the culture was in those days. Now, Kenya was a very dominating cricketing nation in the region. When there were tournaments being played among those countries, Kenya would inevitably be winning most of the time. And so Kenya felt, I think by the time the 79 World Cup took place and this quota system came in, Kenyans felt that no, we have a better cricketers and more of our players should have been on the team. And so there was also a very good network that the administration had with the Indian Cricket Board then and the Pakistan Cricket Board, because remember there was a good interaction between the two countries. So in 1981, Kenya applied to get its own membership. And with the support from India and Pakistan and other countries, Kenya got its membership as Kenya. So we moved out of East Africa, and now Kenya in 1981. And then the first ICC Associate Trophy that Kenya played under Kenya was the 1982, which was played in England. And then that's where Zimbabwe qualified, and Zimbabwe then played the 1983 World Cup, which famously we all remember the Indian team, changed that entire cricket in India after the 83 World Cup. So coming back to Zimbabwe, in 1980, I was playing for Mombasa Sports Club, which was the only team in Mombasa that played for the national in the National League. So every week we would almost travel. I mean, it was 500 kilometers journey by bus. It was a home and away, but we would have to travel more than the other teams coming in because it was the only team. So I was invited to play for the club. And in that very first season, I had a very good season, I think almost getting 37 or 38 wickets in that league, which was the second highest from our top all-rounder called Zulfikar Ali. So I was in the squad against for the tour to Zimbabwe. I was not selected. I was on the standby. Well, fortunately or unfortunately, one of our players got injured, a left-arm spinner. And so, as fate has it, I got called in the last minute. And I had never in my life played a 3-day game until then. So we are on a tour to Zimbabwe, who are a very strong team because they had a lot of cricketing experience with South Africa. I think they were playing the Currie Cup then, and there was many other tough cricket because Zimbabwe, remember, had just become independent that year also. And so they were also deprived of cricket other than playing cricket with South Africa. So Kenya was here, a powerful nation in East Africa. Zimbabwe now is an independent nation, which has also got a cricketing culture. So it was like now, who is better than the other? It became silently to find out. And to our surprise, we were hammered in the trip, But as you rightly said, on my first delivery, I get the wicket of the former Indian coach, Duncan Fletcher. So he was a captain. I didn't even know who he was. Remember, I was a 17-year-old boy. That's the aura of being in the national team and to go on a tour to Zimbabwe. For me, that was sufficient. And then to be put in the 11 in the first match. And I came into ball, I think it was almost like 8th or 10th over. It was a 3-day game. And in my idea of 3-day game, because I'd watched, it's a very slow start. In those days, you would have 20 overs, the score is 20, things are done in a very slow fashion. The fast bowlers bowl for a few overs. Then the spinners come later on. Here is a case where our fast bowlers were being hammered all over. And within 8 or 10 overs, I'm given the ball. So I just come in and bowl. And Duncan takes a swipe, gets an edge. And that's what happened. And that's how I got his wicket.
As a young man, you tasted a lot of success. Obviously, one was playing for Kenya at the international stage on that tour to Zimbabwe. But what your tennis career was also taking off because you also won a scholarship to go to the United States And then you also went to the French Open, played the Davis Cup. How did tennis shape parallelly with your cricket?
In fact, tennis played a very important role in my life because what happened a couple of months after the Zimbabwe tour, there was a junior tournament for the top 20 players of the country to play. But at that time, we didn't know. But I won that tournament, and that opened the door for me to represent Kenya on a European junior circuit to go and play tennis in Europe. So again, that was an exciting moment. So I played the various European tournaments, including the French Open. It was a huge eye-opener for me then also to realize that the standards that we have in Kenya is quite low in tennis. I mean, we had a decent standard, but when you look at the European standard, we had a lot of work to do. But the experience to play that was very important because 3 months later, I had a tennis scholarship to go to America. So tennis gave me the opening to tour Europe. It gave me the opening to study in the university because economically it was not possible to go on our own. So the sport and tennis opened the door for my brother and myself to go on a 4-year tennis scholarship to study in America. And so that not only improved my tennis because you're playing at a very high level, you've got to up the game because the criteria for getting a tennis scholarship were two important factors. One, you must be good enough to be in the team because there are many people there. And secondly, you must have minimum grades. You must have done good enough in your academics to be still in the university. So a lot of discipline was required because remember now you're living 10,000 miles away from your hometown. That's your lifeline. You've got to be in the team. You've got to be good enough in your grades in school to sustain everything level. So we knew if one of them falters, is a flight back. So a lot of discipline was required, a lot of commitment was required. And I think that played a very subconsciously important role, that discipline and commitment is very paramount in anything that you do. And that I think shaped up at the young age, when I was only 17, 18, in those 4 years that I was there, really shaped up my life ahead.
In fact, you speak about that in your documentary as well, that going to the US, how it shaped you as a human being, because it wasn't just a sporting experience. And coming back to Kenya, playing cricket and tennis, what was that one day that you decided, right, I've got to focus on cricket? Or maybe tennis would have also been an option, but you chose cricket.
Well, there were various factors of what happened. I was enjoying both the sports because I was doing well. I was also a champion in my own way in tennis. And remember, tennis is an individual sport. Cricket is a team sport. But what happened in 1992, I think that's where kind of the decision had to be made. I reached the Kenya Open finals for the singles. And on that very day, I was captaining my club where we reached the semifinals of a tournament locally. So now what do I do? I've got to play tennis is a final. It's a huge tournament. And then there is cricket where the team is relying on me as a captain, having done well. So I was in a very troubled situation. And I think we talk about it in the documentary in more depth. But I made a decision trying to be a hero that I will try and be on both the sides. And a long story short, it didn't work. It failed because there is no way that you could go to cricket, come back and play tennis and go back to cricket and all that stuff. So it kind of disheartened me. And that was one. And secondly, I also felt that the Tennis Association was hard on me because at that very time we were preparing for a Davis Cup against, I think it was Romania. And I was not selected. So that also kind of put me off because I am now reached the Kenyan Open final. I've beaten the current players in the team. How can I not be in the squad or on the thing? So that kind of disappointed me. And at the same time, Kenya then had been given the rights to host the 1994 ICC Associate Trophy. Where 20 countries are coming. So that was the defining moment that now I'm having a challenge here, but now cricket is growing. I'm needed there also. What was the carrot that was dangling was that was the first time the three teams were going to qualify for the next World Cup, which was going to be in India, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka in 1996. So we felt, one, that we are playing at home. Two, we had a very good team. We had a seasoned team with some potential youngsters that were going to make it big. So a well-rounded team, and we were coached by late Hanuman Singh, the former Indian cricketer. And just going back 4 years earlier, in Holland, we had reached the semi-finals. The Associate Trophy was played in Holland, where we reached the semi-finals. So the sense of belief kept growing. And so that was a huge incentive that if we do well in that World Cup in 1994 at the Associates, then it's a dream for any professional cricketer to play a World Cup. I mean, there are thousands of professional cricketers, but how many have played the World Cup? It's less than 500 people from 1975 to date. Less than 500 have played World Cup. So it was a huge thing for us. And fortunately, we did very well. We reached the finals. We lost to UAE, but we qualified for the 96 World Cup.
Yes, I was about to come to that, the 94 ICC trophy. And I'm glad you spoke about it because you came second, sealed qualification through to the World Cup. But now there is a World Cup that is coming. It's suddenly a big stage. There are 2 years to go. What were the preparations that were planned for Kenya, and what all happened in those 2 years leading into the trip to India, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka? How did that all pan out for Kenya?
I think I must give a lot of credit to the administration then. I think they were quite focused because first of all, the team did well in terms of qualifying. So obviously it was good for Kenyan cricket, it was good for administration. And this was an opportunity. I mean, it's anybody's dream to play in India, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka, the World Cup. So we had about 2 years gap between the Associate Trophy and the World Cup. So the administration arranged for some competitive trips that we had. Remember, the first country that was most disappointed in not qualifying was Bangladesh, because everybody expected Bangladesh to qualify in 94. And that was the first time Kenya beat Bangladesh in an Associate Trophy. We had played them in 86, we had played them in 90, and now this was the third time, and they beat us in both. So this was very critical. So it was something that was bothering them, to have lost to Kenya and not qualify for the World Cup. So the first trip that was arranged was for the Kenyan team to go to Bangladesh. Now, the cricket that we play here is very limited in terms of crowd support. Where at a big game, you may get 1,000 people coming in. It was a very big game in those days. So we go to Bangladesh because I think they wanted to put the score in place to let us know that, that they're good enough. So we go to Bangladesh, and I think that experience really made us grow because we played in very tough conditions. To play in Bangladesh, it's not easy. They beat us on the series. We hardly won any matches, and so they were feeling good that they beat us, and also gave us a message that really is Kenya really good enough to go to the World Cup. But we were there. We've qualified. So whether anybody likes it or not, Kenya was going to go to the subcontinent. But that tour to Bangladesh was a huge eye opener for us. It made us realize also, again, we need to step up if we had to do something good. And then we had a couple of teams that came in, like India A came in 95 before the World Cup. Ajay Jadeja was captaining and Sandeep Patil was the manager. I mean, Rahul Dravid was there, Saurav Ganguly was there, and many of the other first-class cricketers, top cricketers from India were on that tour. So that 5 one-days that we played, we lost 4-1. And now winning that one match in itself, again, gave us a lot of sense of belief because you're beating the renowned players from India. Following 3 months later, or a couple of months later, we had a tour to South Africa, a 3-week tough tour. We played the top province, Natal, Transvaal, and all the other quality South African, where our first experience to play day-night cricket took place in South Africa. So those preparations with a good coach and the commitment that the players had, because remember, everybody is going to the World Cup for the first time. everybody wants to do well as an individual. You want to do well. You don't want to be a number. I mean, we had our own self-pride. So the combination of all that and the World Cup in itself, and to play in India, I mean, that preparation, I think, was so good that when we came into the World Cup, our minimum goal was to be competitive, that we should not be run over. We were not expected to win any matches, but we in ourselves had pride that we will want to be competitive, so that the other team that we play must say Kenya is a good team and has a good future ahead.
And in the very first game, in fact, you were competitive. It was against India, no less, at Cuttack, and
Correct.
managed to score over 200, put up a fight. And Tendulkar scored 100, yes, but I think towards the end, you almost had him out and appeal was turned down. How was that whole day like? Because it's a dream walking out to play for your country. You've done that on the associate level, but now it's the world stage against India, Cuttack, where 30,000-40,000 people may have turned up to watch the game.
Indeed, a beautiful stadium in Cuttack. It was a beautiful aura, and what impressed us was that I'm talking then, 96, it was our first experience, that the knowledge of cricket by the Indians was amazing. You know, there was a very good cricketing knowledge, and they loved to support good cricket, irrespective of the opponents that are there. Of course, their preference was India, but that experience was amazing in Cuttack. Getting, I think we got 199, just under 200, and Indians scored that in, I think, 42nd or 43rd over. So we in itself felt that we were competitive. We did well. Our players, in fact, after the game, all of a sudden people started talking that if we put in a little bit more effort and have a better sense of belonging, we can be much more than competitive, at international level. Because remember, that was our first experience. And the Kenyans were very proud, they're very committed, and they were hungry for success. So the sense of belief after every match became stronger and stronger.
And I think that sense of belief just grew after the game against West Indies. And people must know this story because played a game in Zimbabwe against Zimbabwe in Patna, and it was the long trek all the way to Pune. You arrived a day before the game up against West Indies, and let's just have a look at the West Indies team. You've got Richie Richardson, Brian Lara, Shivnarayan Chanderpaul, who was up and coming at the time. And as far as the bowling is concerned, you had Curtly Ambrose, Courtney Walsh, Ian Bishop, you name it, and they had it all. What was it like heading into that game, just arriving in Pune and up against the mighty West Indians?
In fact, we rightfully, because Patna, what happened, we had to stay an extra day because the first day it was rained out, where we were in a very good commanding position against Zim. But the next day we were outplayed. So we had a long journey from Patna to Delhi, Delhi to Bombay, Bombay to Pune. That's where the match was. So we arrived on the eve of the match. So we never went to the ground and nothing. But, remember before that game, this was something that everybody was waiting for, because most of our African cricketers looked up to the West Indians, from the days of Viv Richards to Clive Lloyd. Those are the names that all the players came up to, and then the current names that you gave. So for us was to just go out, enjoy that moment, rub shoulders with them, take a few photographs, feel good about it, and do the best that we can. So we have no idea on how the wicket is. We have no idea on what's going to happen. But the mere fact of playing West Indies was something that we were talking about from the time we left Kenya. So we go on the day, and so of course the warming up, and now you see the team coming, tall, big guys, walking in on the ground. So they're warming up, we're warming up on one side. So most of our players are looking at them on what they are doing instead of focusing on ourselves, because the aura was so much for our players that just to look at Brian Lara was a novelty, that you're now next, few feet away from him. So you're going to, play against them or with them. And so it's going to be a huge thing. So what surprised me later on when I thought about it, their body language was extremely poor that day. I felt that there's something not correct there. But of course, at that stage, you don't know. It's something, maybe that's how they train. The biggest surprise was when they win the toss, you would expect them to bat and get some practice and score some runs. among what I would say is a fairly weak bowling attack that we had. So they decide to field. And one thing that we had said in ourselves in the team meetings and all the matches, irrespective of the situation, we must bat 50 overs. We cannot get out in 40 overs or 35 overs. If we bat 50 overs, we'll get a decent score. So we I think batted 49 plus overs and got about 166 on the day. Okay, and so the wicket was tough. It was very greenery and all. And so, of course, in the changing room, we now discussed, because we came the eve of the match. So we were also tourists. We wanted to play cricket, but we also want to see India. So we are now in Pune. We heard so much about Pune. So we said, okay, the guys, the 3-4 seniors were talking about it. So how many overs these guys are going to get their runs in? So that we can finish the game quick. We go to the hotel, shower, and then go and visit Pune, because the following day we were to fly to Colombo for our match against Sri Lanka. So everybody gives their own over, 30 overs, 28 overs, 32 overs, or whatever. So we go on the field. We start disastrously. Our wicketkeeper struggles. The ball goes through his gloves. We're wondering what's going on. And all of a sudden, we get the first wicket of Richie Richardson. Rajab Ali was bowling. So we got the first wicket. Wow, that's a huge wicket. So now the idea was, let's get 4 or 5 wickets so that we are a competitive performance again, because that was the goal from the beginning of the tour. So another wicket falls. I think Campbell got out next, and then walks in the mighty Brian Lara. And the first very ball, he cover drives majestically to Rajab. It was like, wow, first ball, green wicket, you're wondering, So, okay, so it's like nobody talked about it, but now I think 25 overs, maybe the overs we will bowl. And then within an over, Rajab bowls beautifully, gets his nick, gets caught behind a keeper who was struggling until then. Was a complete transformation by our wicketkeeper, who was a very good keeper. But I don't know what happened that day. And then rest is history. The pressure that we put on them, and they crumbled to pieces, after that. And the sense of belief immediately came after we got Brian Lara's wicket. They opened the door for us. And then we kept the pressure on. Morris bowled extremely well, tight from one end. I was bowling tight on the other end. And the pressure that the bowlers gave with the good backup of the fielding, and we got stronger and stronger, and they got weaker and weaker. And then, as you say, the rest is history. We created what was regarded then as the upset, all-time upset in sports history. For a young nation, Kenya, to beat a 2-time world champions, West Indies.
And yes, West Indies were in fact off color that day. I was just looking at the scorecard, and they bowled as many as 37 extras. So there were like 14 wides and 13 no balls. 10 were leg byes, of course, that still counts. But then so many wides and no balls on that day. You mentioned Tariq Iqbal, and he's someone who caught the fans' attention here as well, because we had heard that in later times as well that he was actually a very good player. But what was seen on screen was that day when he struggled. So I'm sure on field, you may have spoken to him, having known him for a long time. Maybe a bit of empathy, just gather yourself and, just do what you can. And ultimately, he did get that catch of Brian Lara.
Indeed. He was one of the senior members of the team, and he was a close friend of mine. And I was standing in the slips right next to him when all this drama was going on. So I kept encouraging him, and it's like any other sport, you can have a bad day. So he had a bad start, but he finished extremely strong. If you saw his keeping post Lara catch, there was a different Tariq Iqbal. He did great. He took a stumping, he took a caught behind on the leg side, and there was a complete transformation from where he had started. So that shows character of regrouping and coming back strong. And then, of course, there was huge support from the management. There was huge support from within the team, because, as I said, we all wanted to do well, and if we do well as individual, it helps the team and vice versa.
Now, you were talking about how well will West Indies finish the game. Well, they did finish the game in 35.2 overs, but the result was in Kenya's favor. Did that give you time for the planned sightseeing that was discussed in the dressing room, or was there a celebration after that?
Well, indeed, everybody forgot about the sightseeing because, the whole euphoria changed, because at that time, I remember also there were a lot of Kenyan support we had at the stadium because a lot of Kenyan students were studying in Pune. So when they heard about Kenya playing, but most of the Kenyan students who came there had no idea on cricket. So they were just cheering because, as I said, cricket was not a major sport in Kenya. So the local Africans were not very familiar on how the sport is, but they were there just because Kenya was participating. So once we won the game, I mean, everybody forgot about the sightseeing and all that. It was just celebration upon celebration, phone calls coming through, messages going through, because it became a huge thing. I mean, for it to be mentioned in CNN news in those days was a novelty. So it was in the media, of course, Indian media, nobody can beat. It was all over in the media, Indian media. I mean, it was just talk of Kenya. Now, all of a sudden, who is Kenya? What is Kenya? Everything, interviews started coming in. And so Kenya's, I think tourism improved because of that, because all of a sudden, the Indian world and the world all of a sudden wanted to know where Kenya is, what is Kenya. So I think the Kenyan cricket team did a lot of justice to the Kenyan embassy in India. We marketed in Kenya, I think much more than the embassy did in our trip to the World Cup. So it was a wonderful feeling. It was great. We had a dinner. In fact, the West Indians had organized a dinner the night before to say that after the game, they're going to host us a dinner, thinking that they're going to win. So they're going to just, a social. So, I mean, it became very embarrassing to put it for them because now we are all in the same room. We should be us hosting them. They are hosting us, so it was very kind of an awkward. But then, of course, as cricketers and as professionals, everybody enjoyed that evening. And it was something that you could not change the result. So they were happy for us. And of course, we made the most of that situation.
But those memories also continued, with the Indian team later, because in 1998, the Kenyan team was back in India, this time playing a tri-series with Bangladesh and India. Obviously, it was seen as a preparation for the 99 World Cup. But one of the days was very important for you, which was the victory at Gwalior against India. And you were the captain. You led the team in that whole series. I remember one of the balls you bowled in the series was getting Rahul Dravid bowled. And it was a beautiful, nice ball that nearly yorked him. So can you tell me about that series and, of course, the win at Gwalior?
Well, the history of that tour, again, I give a lot of credit to BCCI. Jagmohan Dalmia was the president then. And after our 1997 ICC Associate Trophy tournament, where we again qualified for the next World Cup, again, 3 teams were qualified. So it was Bangladesh who beat us in the final on the last ball, ourselves and Scotland qualified for that World Cup. So at that very stage, Bangladesh and Kenya administrators felt that we need to up the associate countries to certain level. So that was the very first time in 1997 late that ICC agreed to create what they call a one-day international team. And Bangladesh and Kenya were accorded the ODI status. We were the first 2 countries to have been accorded the ODI status. And obviously, after getting that status, it would only justify if we played some big cricket against the bigger nations. And that was the purpose then. So, of course, the BCCI again supported, and so they created this tri-nation tournament, which was in the month of May. Now, India in May is, it's pretty hot, but we were not concerned about the weather. We were very keen to play as much cricket as we could because we had very limited cricket. So the sense of belief kept growing, from 94 qualifying for the World Cup, 96 to do well, 97 to qualify. And then we not only qualified for the 99 World Cup, we also qualified for the Commonwealth Games because at that time, first time cricket was being played in the Malaysian 98 Commonwealth. So this series was created and it was played in May. And we played India in, of course, they were round robin, but the match you're talking about is in Gwalior. Again, when Azhar and myself went to toss, they had kept the temperature on the wicket. And believe me or not, it was 54 degrees.
Wow.
But what baffled me more, I think that stadium can carry about 20 to 25,000 people then. It was packed. I'm saying to myself, I mean, in this heat, they can easily watch it on television, but the love they have for cricket and the love they have for their cricketers, the stadium was packed. So anyway, we had a good score. We won the toss, score about 260 odd. And again, we put pressure on the Indian team, and they crumbled. I think we won by about 60 or 70 runs. And that was the second big victory for Kenyan cricket, to beat India in India. I mean, to beat India anywhere is a novelty, but to beat India in India with such a huge name, Azhar, Sachin, Kumble, Dravid. I mean, there was a full Indian team, so it was a great win. And of course, we qualified for the finals and got an opportunity to play at Eden Gardens on the finals. And of course, India put us where we belong to. They beat us very badly in that we lost by, I think, 9 wickets. But for us, the job was done. It was achieved that Kenya was now becoming a force to reckon with. It is a force at international level. It is a team that nobody will take us lightly. They would, of course, not fear us, but they would not take us lightly. And that was evident as we moved along because Kenyan cricket grew from strength to strength.
Now you played the 99 World Cup, but after that, you decided to move away from the game. You were anyway 35 years old, decided to focus on your business as well, which to this day you have managed to grow over time. So what was the thought behind moving away from cricket? 99 wasn't a World Cup that Kenya really remembers anyway. So why did you move away from the game then?
Well, 99 World, of course, first I was honored to have captained the team at a World Cup, and that's a huge honor to get. And playing in England was not easy. We were used to the subcontinent conditions. We were used to our own conditions where our spin attack really played an important role. We had 30, 35 overs in every match that was dominated by spin attack. Now, we played in England, we played early summer. I mean, it was the month of May. It was freezing cold. We couldn't even hold the ball. And most of our cricketers, not only not having played in England, most of them had never even visited England. And playing in England in those conditions, it's not easy. We did not win any match, but we were competitive in most of our matches. So we felt satisfied in that. But I know most people feel that unless you win, then you have done well. I'm not of that thought. I'm thought of, if you are competitive enough as a young team, you are growing. It is a process. It's not something you're going to do overnight. But that's my thinking that, we were growing, we were making a name. So people felt that, well, maybe now he's old, he's not good enough. And of course, politics comes in. Secondly, I'd already played 20 years for the country, from 1980 to 99. So having played 2 World Cups, 4 associate trophies, it was not something that was generating income. I played for the love of the sport. So, of course, business had to be looked after. I had a young family. And so there were many other factors, and I could feel that I'm now being pushed out. Though deep down I felt I should still have been there, because at that very stage, at the international level, experience was paramount. And they needed a leader who could keep the team together, because it's one thing to play at international level. It's another thing to lead and keep the team together, because remember, the Kenyan team had a mixed brand of people in that group. We had the Indians and the Africans. In the Indians, we had the Muslims and the Hindus. In the Africans, we have a lot of tribes here. So we had different tribes then to top it all up, we had some players who are educated and some, unfortunately, who are not educated. Now, how do you mix that cocktail and to make sure that you're doing a good job internationally? So I felt now maybe it's time to just exit and exit with an honorable win. So that was the reason why I exited myself.
Ahead of the 2003 World Cup, I remember Kenya had played, of course, the Champions Trophy in 2002. And then there was a tour to Zimbabwe. Heading into the World Cup, everyone was following scores. And suddenly there is a headline saying that former captain Aasif Karim and Alpesh Wadher, I think, recalled for the 2003 World Cup. And I remember reading in the news report that Aasif Karim hasn't played international cricket since the 99 World Cup. And suddenly you're back on for the 2003 World Cup. Did you play a single game in those 4 years, maybe even at club level or any other level? Also, what was your preparation once you were told? How did that all come about that you were suddenly jettisoned into the Kenyan team?
As you gave the brief that, and as I mentioned to you earlier, captaining a team at international level is not very easy. Especially when you want to focus on your own performance and you want to focus on your team's performance, to be credible. The Zimbabwe tour was the last straw in the camel's back because there were so many problems post 99, and it all volcaned at the Zimbabwe tour because there were a lot of allegations, problems within the team. There was no harmony. Sandeep Patil was the coach then. He was even frustrated to the end. The management was all upset. The board was worried because there were rumors that the players were now going to demand money if they had to go to the World Cup 2003. So there were a lot of issues. So I think they felt that they needed to bring in somebody to kind of sober up things or bring a better repo or calm the situation down. Now, this was the same board who pushed me out in 99. And it's the same board who is now short of begging, if I can use that word, to please come back. Because remember, in those 4 days, I had no interaction with the board. I only played occasional club cricket. But I used myself fit in terms of my own health and my, doing some exercise and all that. So when they contacted me, I was actually taken aback, thinking that they are contacting me maybe because they want me to either manage the team or just be a consultant or help the team in somehow. And the chairman of selection says, no, I want you to be in the team. So again, I asked him, in the team as what, as a manager or as I said, no, as a player. I said, you must be joking. I said, I haven't played for 4 years. He says, no, your presence is what is required. Whether you play or you don't play, we need you so that you can sober up the situation because it was brewing. And the first assignment I got was to calm the team down within the week because of they wanted to boycott and bring mutiny to the team. And that is the last thing Kenya wanted, especially when we are making headway at international level. We're doing well at international level. We're looking at test status. Remember, Bangladesh got the test status in 2001 or 2000. So Kenya was knocking the door. So how would we want to mess up all the hard work that was there? So they felt that my coming in may help. And when I got selected, I mean, it took me a few days to really ponder whether this is a good decision of me saying yes or am I going to mess it up. But then the country needed me, the board required me, and remember, no matter what the situation is, it was a World Cup that I'm going to. It's a dream for anybody to play any World Cup. So I also wanted to satisfy myself that the decision that they made in 99 vindicated that it was an incorrect decision by them for them to call me back for 2003. So I immediately, and of course, Patil supported it wholeheartedly because it was a huge relief for him because he was having a tough time with the team. So my coming in, and of course, I committed myself to training every day. It was about a month to 6 weeks before the tour. So I knew what I needed to do. I played at the highest level in tennis and cricket. So I knew what I needed to do to be in shape. So that was first. Second, I always have a sense of belief in myself. I believe in my own ability. So I worked hard in the training. I worked hard during the practice matches. I did well in that. And that was the reason why I even got selected for the first match against South Africa that I played. Of course, we had a very low score. We were outplayed in that match. And again, not everybody was happy with my presence in the team because I was kind of a threat to certain people in the leadership or to certain people and the senior players. So if they got an opportunity to sideline me, they did it. But it was okay because for me, the cause was greater, that my presence was there to calm the situation and to bring things in place so that the mutiny was thrown out after I had a word with the team. I explained to them the situation. And so the course was greater. Of course, I was disappointed. I should have, because before the tour, the management is very keen that I play against Bangladesh and I play against the other, Canada was there. So these being like the associate countries, and I already had a good impact at associate level over the years, they felt that those two teams I would make a huge impact. But because I did so well in the friendly matches and all that, I was selected against South Africa, not played against those two teams. I was recalled again to play against Zimbabwe. And then the following match was against Australia. So that's how the whole structure took place.
It's really amazing that in spite of everything happening off the field, on field, things fell into place. Of course, firstly, New Zealand did not come around to play in Nairobi, their scheduled game, and those points went to Kenya. But then Kenya went on to beat Sri Lanka in the World Cup. And that was a big game because you beat Sri Lanka in front of your home crowd and then beating Bangladesh, Canada as well. That pushed Kenya into the Super Sixes along with points because Sri Lanka and Zimbabwe also qualified with you and you carried forward those points as well. What was that whole campaign like where things started falling into place and suddenly you're in the Super Six and that big win against Sri Lanka?
Well, again, as I said, when we started the tour to the World Cup, again, the idea was to win a couple. I think we had targeted a couple of wins. One was against Canada because they were the weak group in our group. And then started badly with South Africa, winning Canada, and then beating Sri Lanka. That again changed the sense of belief. And then, of course, whichever way we got points by New Zealand not showing up. So we already had good points to take us to the next level. And once again, we beat them. So by the time we finished the World Cup, we were 6-1 or 7-1 ahead of Bangladesh on the one-day international that we played over the years. So we did well. We reached the Super Six. I think that's what it was called.
Yes.
And then we played India in a very close contested match, and I think Ganguly and Yuvraj carried the day. They played extremely well, but it was a very tight match. I think at one stage India was 20-3, having got Sachin, Sehwag, and Kaif. So Ganguly came and played a majestic inning with UV. We then lost badly to West Indies. Of course, they also had a score to settle with us a few years back, so they hammered us well. And then we were to play Zimbabwe to see whether we would qualify because we needed one win in the Super Six. We either beat India, the second team was Zim and Australia. So when we played Zimbabwe, I was asked to play in that match. I had a decent spell, but the biggest satisfying thing was two. One, we thrashed them. We beat them very badly. Now, remember my first trip, 1980, where they hammered us, and they kept hammering us for 23 years. And for me to sign off, beating them in a World Cup, was a personal satisfaction for me, having started in 1980. And then to win that gave us the semi-finals, confirmed semi-finals to play against India. And so that's how the team kept growing, and Kenya then became the center of attraction in the World Cup. I mean, it had more coverage than India and Australia and all the other big names because, we did well. Our cricket was very flamboyant. They loved our style. They loved the characters that we had in the team. And so the things were looking good for Kenya cricket. And that's how we got to the semi-finals.
But that one night in Durban was, of course, really memorable because Bretley had taken a hat-trick. Kenya fought their way to 174, defending 175, and Adam Gilchrist does what he does best, goes after the new ball, smashes the ball to all parts of the ground. And, of course, a couple of wickets fall and you are introduced into the bowling attack. And by then, of course, nobody's expecting Kenya to do anything because Australia had gotten more than 100 runs in the first 15 overs. you were handed the ball. What were you thinking? And what was your approach? Because suddenly you made the ball talk and you got some big players out.
Yeah, in fact, I remember it was 109 for 2 of 15 overs, Australia were. And as you rightly said, Gilchrist was on a rampage. He was just hammering the balls all over. So, of course, the 16th over came in, the restrictions were out, and so I was given the ball. And as always, when I take the ball, I give it my best. I have more ability on myself than to be worried about who I'm bowling to. For me, that is important, that I have a sense of belief in my courage. But of course, the mood was then that now it's a matter of few overs, and the game will be over in the next 10 or 12 overs left, because they needed another 50 odd runs. So I come into bowl and I bowled the first one to Ponting. It turned. And I said to myself, no, this looks good. Let me try a little bit more. Second ball, it turned, it beat him, it got his edge, he was dropped. If you, I don't know if you can remember that. So I said to myself, no, I'm going to give it my best shot. Let him get the runs that if he's good enough, let him get runs off me. So we kept a very attacking field. It was an attacking field. It was not the people in the boundaries and all over. And every ball, he struggled on my first over. So on the fifth ball, I said, let me try an arm ball on him, and then the rest is history. I mean, you get a batsman that has, dominated cricket for so many years, at the highest level, that I'm told even the Australian bowlers used to fear bowling to him, in their own domestic cricket. So getting his wicket has always been talked about to date as we are talking. In fact, in every interview I go through this discussion, it's always a good feeling. And then we kept the pressure on to the other batsmen there as they came in. And I mean, at one stage, I think before my ninth over, the stats read 8 overs, 6 maidens, 2 runs and 3 wickets. So as I was going end of the over and I looked at the scoreboard, I felt something is not correct, because it cannot be correct. How can it be 8 overs and 6 maidens and 2 runs? So because we were in that euphoria of the game. And they were getting runs from the other side. Where I was having a good time, the other bowlers were having a tough time, and they were getting runs easily on the other end. So it was something that became a talk of tournament. It's been talked about 20 years down the road. It's something that features in every interview that I do. And I can only say that it was a process of 23 years. That became the eye to the cave, what you want to say. It's something that I will treasure until I die. It's something that is very special to me and my family and to all my close friends and supporters. They always talk about it. In fact, the other day, I got a message that on the ICC link, I think it's a minute 42 on Facebook, it has 32 million views to date and counting. I mean, that's huge numbers, and many of them are watching it again because they find it fascinating on what happened in that. And so something that has always been special and something I will remember all my life.
I watched that spell again. In fact, there is a highlight on YouTube, ball by ball, of your spell against Australia, and just to watch it. And I remember I just started playing cricket then, and, we had a couple of left-arm spinners. I remember coaches telling them, your action should be very simple. The ball should come out nicely. And I could just reminisce that night watching on in front of my television, that your bowling action and the way you approached it just looked very simple and very to the point, and you just followed what you knew best.
Correct. I mean, as I said, I had a sense of belief. And I also remember I had 20 plus years of experience having played cricket at a long time. And as I keep on saying that, I would find it a challenge or an inspiration to bowl against the big names that are there. But I had a lot of belief in myself. Whether I played club cricket or whether I played international cricket or any cricket, that I want to do well, I'm going to give it my best. Irrespective of what competition there is there, because I cannot undermine or even underrate anything. I'm focused in what I want to do. I have a job to do. Let me do the best that I can. And I think that is paramount in anything one does in life. When you're doing the job of anything that you do, give it your best. Give it 100%, and then the result will take its own course. And if you're given it your best, And if it doesn't work well, it's okay.
And of course, after the World Cup, Kenya made it through to the semi-final, lost to India in that semi-final, but it was definitely a great moment for cricket in Kenya. For you personally, also walking away from the game this time would have been with a lot more fulfillment. So,
Indeed.
moving into the next phase of your life, you take that fulfillment in, and then you begin to document the journey of your family. And that journey just grows with your son Irfan going on to play for Kenya as well. So, can you tell us about the years after the World Cup where you've continued with your business? At the same time, you've put in a lot of effort to document that journey.
Yes, remember, we were never paid to play the country. We all started playing for the love of the sport. In fact, there were times you would have to pay to play. That's how the journey started. It was at the end of my career that I got a little money through the allowances and through the prize money that we got. Post 2003, I mean, because my dad had kept a very good record of what he had done. In those days, newspaper articles was a huge thing. If your name appeared in the newspaper in the 50s and 60s, I mean, it was a huge thing. I mean, for some people who are in the journalism trade will understand what I'm talking about. It was a huge thing. So he had documented himself very nicely. So I learned from him since childhood. So whenever my name or headline came in the newspaper, be it tennis or cricket, I would also, cut that and keep it properly filed and all that stuff. And when we were traveling to India or England or Bangladesh, you go to a bookstore and you see names of the cricketers or the sports people of that country with their books on it, posters on it. And it was unheard of in Kenya. So I said to myself that once I've retired with so much of history that is there, I would like to write a book, to document my own experience, to document what the family has done. But it was something that I will do, and it just kind of took a back burner because there are businesses to do and so many things. And it's a real process again to write a book. I mean, you are a producer, writer, so you know what I'm talking about. So I wanted to, and then in 2010, an Indian director who was living in Kenya, and my kids and his kids were studying in the same school. So we became friends. So he walked into my office one day and said, listen, and he was a filmmaker. So he says that, listen, I've been thinking about it. I think we need to do a documentary on your family. So, I mean, a book was a novelty, for us. A documentary, and me, you must be joking. I mean, I laughed it out because remember, it's 10, 15 years ago. We were it's not for us. We would always think it is for the Tendulkars and the Pontings and the Gilchrist and the Bothams and the Viv. He says, no, I'm serious about it. So I said, okay, let me think about it. Of course, I took up the matter at home and everybody was kind of brushed it aside because what story? So he came back, he convinced me, and then he did a documentary that is on YouTube, where he took a journey of 100 years since my grandfather came in 96, so how the journey went, with one family playing two sports, in 3 generations on the matter. And so that's how he created it. And then I took that opportunity that what I wanted to do was to write a book. So again, having taken some views from India and Dubai and some publishers, they said, no, let's not do a book, let's do a coffee table book. So I was explaining then what a coffee table book is and how we're going to do it, because I told them what material I have. So that took me, the documentary took about a year and a half to do. The book took 6 years to do because it was about 120 years of editorial material with about 800 photographs. So it was a mission to do, and so that's how the journey took place. And at that very time, Irfan debuted for the country in I think 2008 when he was 17, 18 to play for the country. Then he went to university in England. He studied in Loughborough University, which is near Leicester. It's one of the top sporting universities in England. That's where the England team trains. There's an academy there, and the England national team also trains there. So he played first-class cricket for the university. In one of the tournaments, they won the 2020 tournament, and there was a World Cup, a University World Cup, and that was hosted in India in Dehradun in 2015. So his university won, so they represented England. So he represented England in the University World Cup, where they reached the finals and lost to South Africa. But he was declared the best batsman of the tournament. I think he averaged about 80, in the 2020. So he did very well. I was fortunate that I managed to go there. I did some commentating work in that tournament. And so saw him firsthand do well, talk about him while he's playing. So that's the journey that was there on the book and on Irfan.
Yes, it's really a long journey. You said 100 years, documenting what started with your grandfather, then your father being a legend in Kenyan sport, and you taking the mantle ahead. And of course, Irfan continuing to play T20 cricket as well for Kenya at the moment. So it's been a really long journey. But I just want to add one more question, which I wanted to ask you, because this is a point that someone I know had once raised, that playing tennis, sometimes it can be a very lonely sport, because you play a lot of singles. If you lose a game, you come back to an empty room. Cricket being a team sport, you play with your teammates. So just to sum it up, cricket versus tennis, how do you compare the two in that sense?
I think both are very special sports. Like every sport is special, but I feel very blessed to have had the opportunity to play at the highest level on both the sport. As I said, tennis was an individual sport where you have to make the decision alone. Your success is your own, your failure is your own. Cricket was a team sport where you need to support your team needs to support you for everybody to do well. So it also helps you in life, that there are certain things you have to make decisions on your own. There are times where you have your family, where everybody plays an important role, is a team. The family is a team. Company where you work is a team. The staff that you're working with is a team. For the success of that company, every staff is important, from your messenger to the team maker, to the secretary, to your personal assistant, to the managers. Everybody plays a key role to the success of it. So each one has his own plus and each one has his own minus. And when you fail individually, it's you alone. As you said, you are in an empty room and you've just got to carry it forward.
Right. Thank you so much for joining us on this call and on this podcast. And we've really had a great time discussing not just your journey through the Cricket World Cups, but what your family has contributed to sport in Kenya. And it's, of course, a journey that deserved to be documented. And I'm glad that the documentary is out there. I would request all our listeners to log into YouTube and search for Karim's A Sporting Dynasty. It's, of course, a documentary where you'll get a lot of things to learn about. And I think you must grab that. And yes, if you ever get a chance, then also grab the coffee table book, because there is definitely a lot to learn. So Aasif, thank you so much for joining us, and we wish you the very best in all your endeavors. And yes, may this journey continue to grow and grow even ahead. I'm sure there will be a lot in the future as well.
Thank you. May I add one more thing? Right now, as my contribution or my family's contribution to sports, there's a lot of people saying, why am I not helping in the administration of Kenyan cricket now that it is so low? The scenario is very tough right now. We have a lot of issues there. So I decided that I would like to give back to sports. And for the last 23 years, I publish a sports magazine. It's called Sports Monthly, which is the only sports magazine in the country. And for the last 6 years, I'm also hosting Kenya International Sports Film Festival, which is the only sports film festival in Africa. We are now recognized by the IOC. And I would just request your viewers that we have a hybrid festival, so they could follow all the excellent movies, sports movies only, that we showcase over the 4 days in October. But thank you very much for the opportunity. I appreciate you setting up this interview. I enjoyed it very much, and I look forward to seeing it, and I wish you all the very best in your work.
Thank you so much. And it's really exciting to know about the festival and the fact that there is a sports magazine, because we need those magazines to come back, because some cricket lovers or sports lovers like us who still love reading, we want those magazines to remain alive. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, and all the very best.